everyone. I'm Gemma Starr, and welcome to another episode of Heart Warriors. Heart Warriors is a series I've been guided and inspired to do thanks to my energetic connection with Katajuda. Katajuda, as you all know by now, is our beautiful sacred masculine site in Central Australia, very close. In fact, it's only about 60k, which is about 40 miles away from Uluru, our sacred feminine site. So what I'm here to do is to give a platform to men so they can share their journey into the heart. I ask them to share a bit about their childhood, their rock bottom moment, and we find out how they spiraled up from there. Their highs, their lows, their experiences, tools, practices, insights, wisdom, knowledge, and of course, we talk about masculinity, men, and really whatever comes up in the conversation. Today's guest is a man called John Roedel, and he is a writer, a poet, a comic, a storyteller, and I made me laugh because he said he was a terrible dancer. So we'll find out all about John's story into the heart. Enjoy. Hello, John Roedel. Welcome to Heart Warriors. How are you today?
I am doing great. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for asking me. Yeah, it's amazing.
Oh, awesome. Well, let's find out all about John and his journey into the heart. You said you'd seen a couple, so I like to find out about the inner man. When you drop all that external castle and labels, who is the man inside?
I'm still figuring that out, which is amazing. That's what's fun about this. I think for a good chunk of my life, I thought I knew who I was and I knew what I was about. And it was just, and I was running into a brick wall. I had reached the ceiling and I was like, is this all who I am? And that's where I'm at. And it was like this knot inside of me. And then over the last 5 years, I found one of the, when you're trying to untangle a knot and pull on one end, I found an end to start pulling on. And next thing you know, the heart has unspooled completely from this big knot into this big pile of string that I'm just holding on to and tracing with my fingers. And so I don't know. I don't know who I am yet, but that's part of the adventure of it all. Is I'm getting to figure it out. And the person I am today is vastly different than who I was 5 years ago. And I'm kind of excited because that means 5 years from now, I'll still be learning about who I am and exploring parts of myself I didn't know existed. So it's a great question. It's a mystery, but it's a fun mystery to solve.
I love that. And I'm the same, just growth. It's just like soul expansion. Bring it on.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's find out a bit about little John. What was the major challenge you had to overcome as a child?
So that's a great. When I was born into a family of scientists, I guess would be a best way of putting it. My dad was a pharmacist. My father's father was a pharmacist. My brother is an engineer. My mom was a very serious, single room schoolhouse teacher. Holding a ruler, very serious. I was born into a serious family, and I didn't quite fit in, loved and taken care of and all those things, but I was definitely the alien child that was dropped off on their doorstep. And so definitely for me, the biggest challenge was fitting into this very structured household in which I was expected to be kind of like everyone else. And I knew from an early age, I just wasn't playing the same music that everyone else in my house was. There's a different song playing in the back of my head that everyone else was dancing to. And it took me years, and that was probably part of the reason I'm just discovering who I am now, because I think I was able to push some of it back and, start acting like other people, mirroring other people, trying to be like people that I was never going to be like, just so I didn't have conflict and, pushback. And why can't you be more like, I hated being told, like, why can't you be more like this person? So instead of being told that, I would just try to be like other people. And so I think conformity and not embracing who I was, and I think my family was embracing exactly who they were. They were great models for embracing who they were born to be. They weren't conforming. That's who they were. And I wasn't following their example. I was just following, trying to be like them. And now, my parents have passed on, and my brother, he works for Xbox and he does things I don't even understand. He's been who he's been his whole life. He's followed his path. I'm starting to do that now. But my biggest challenge was all the probably psychological and emotional turmoil that a person has who's not living who they're born to be.
Yeah, that's amazing because so many of us were like that as children, trying to conform. At what age did you, I mean, you said that you're sort of working through it now, but was there a younger age where you realized, hang on, I'm not who these people are trying to shape me into being, and I'm someone completely different?
Yeah, no, yes. There were different parts when the acorn cracked at different times, and little sprouts would come out, and then eventually the sprout would go back in because it got too scary. But yeah, there, like when I was 7 or 8 years old, I became obsessed with. So my parents had me at a later age in their life. So my third parent was television. I loved 80s and 90s television. Saturday Night Live was my third parent. And so I remember watching Saturday Night Live, probably way too young. I was like maybe 8 or 9, and I would stay up late, sneak out, and watch Saturday Night Live. And I desperately wanted to be like one of those comedians on TV. And so I started doing stand up and practicing it at home in like a mirror. And I do little funny routines. I do a little Charlie McCarthy ventriloquist act. I did this whole thing. My parents didn't know I was doing until there was a family party in which I just jumped up on a coffee table at 9 years old and just performed, right, the little 20-minute set in front of like my open-jawed family that could not believe what I was doing. And I did it, and I thought it went well. My parents didn't seem to think it was during a wake, a funeral wake. So the timing was probably not great. But there were times like that where I would just inherently jump into something or do something because it was calling to me, and then I would do it, and then I would probably bump into some disproving discussions afterward, or looks and glances over the eyes and over the glasses, and then I would recede back into just trying to march along with everybody else. But that was one I remember at 7 or 8 jumping up on a coffee table. There were times in school where school was never a priority for me as a child. I was in a Catholic school with nuns and rosaries and the whole thing, and I didn't quite fit into any of that. I would get into arguments during religion class. I would get thrown out. There were definite, looking back now, there was definitely foreshadowing of things to come later in my life that at the time I didn't put any stakes into thinking these were important distinctions I was having with other people. But now looking back as an adult, as a child, there was a ton of red flags or rainbow flags or whatever it was to say that I was going to be a little bit different than everybody else I was surrounding myself with. Yeah, that was the first big one. And then even going through high school and college, I didn't really care about academics. Whenever I would go into a counselor's office, they'd say, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" And I don't know. I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to be something. I just wanted to be now, in the now. And I remember talking that with my senior guidance counselors, like, where do you see yourself in 20 years? And I said, I don't know. I only think about 30 minutes in the future, which doesn't do great for guidance counselor conversations or very serious parents who want you to take your future seriously. But I was so enthralled with the present that the future didn't really, I wasn't interested in setting flagpoles in the future.
John, how different of a person are you now that you are coming into yourself, your expression, who you want to be, as opposed to maybe 10, 20 years ago when you were still in that mold of what your parents wanted you to be? What's the difference?
Freedom, fearless. I don't really, even 5, 6 years ago, so worried about what other people thought. So worried that if people saw past the armor, I loved how you opened with the castle, saw past the castle doors and saw what was going on inside, that I would be looked at as weak or as not together. And it really bothered me. I'm approaching 50, and when you're 40 years old, you start bumping into friends who have timeshares in Cabo, Mexico, or they have the third fancy sports car. And again, I don't really know what I want to do with my life. I didn't know anything about that. I didn't really have any ambitions or any career or anything like that. And I was feeling very self-conscious, and I was starting to compare myself to my peers. And I was very, I was hiding a lot of it, and that's what probably made me so sick inside. Was I was just not letting any sunlight in, and I wasn't letting any inner light out. It was just a dark cabin inside of myself, and a vastly different person. It's been a slow boil for me to get to where I'm at now, and there's been a series of breaks in the shutters of this cabin that I've lived in. Different parts of the wall have fallen down. It's different points where light could come in, but it's taken about 20 years to get to where I am now. And the difference is I don't really worry about what other people think anymore. I worry about how they feel, and I worry about, how I can help them. And my empathy has grown, but I'd no longer worry about what they think about me, if that makes any sense.
Oh, definitely. I totally get it. John, speak directly to men who are still trying to break out of this parental molding or societal molding. What can you say to those men to encourage them to find themselves or to express themselves if they know who they are?
There's a other side to this fear that we have. There's this wall, and it's societal, and I live in a state in America called Wyoming. We are cowboy country. We are hard winters, 60-mile-an-hour winds, barbed wire everywhere. It's ranch cowboy area. When you get hurt, you rub dirt on it. So you don't talk about your feelings. You keep it all bottled inside. And it's a beautiful country, and the people here are amazing and tough and independent minded. But we also have one of the highest suicide rates in the world, and for men specifically. Because of this, we're afraid to let people see past our denim jackets or our cowboy hats to see that underneath this tough, rugged exterior that many men have, there is still that child inside of them that is calling out to them through their childhood, through their years, saying, there is still magic in this world. There's still magic in you. There is something wondrously splendid about you. And it's not just about hiding it from the world. It's about these emotions. And I believe that all these emotions that we carry around with us, even the ones that feel negative or dangerous, they're miracles. These emotions that we have, they're what separate us. It's what makes me believe in the divine. It's my proof of magic in real life. When I feel sad about something, it's amazing to feel sad, because that means I'm feeling something extraordinary. Rocks don't feel sad. Robots don't feel sad. Computers don't feel sad. But we get the opportunity of having our hearts broken at different times. And it's important for us to let other people know that our hearts can get broken. When I was a child, I didn't ever see my parents ever talk about grief or sadness or heartache. And it wasn't, I never ever had that glimpse into the human experience from my parents. And I learned from that modeling that I need to keep it hidden because it's too dangerous to let out. But now I'm trying to tell as many people as I can, and specifically men, that there is this wellspring of beauty inside of us, and joy and gratitude and love and even sadness and sometimes even anger. These are wonderful things that if we can just learn how to harness and let out and let other people see them, it's what helps us connect to one another. Me and another person down the street might have vastly different political opinions. We might have a different way we look at the world, different religious beliefs, whatever it is. But we both know what it's like to lose somebody and to grieve. We both know what it feels like to have that sadness inside of us. So the more I share that with the world, it's like a thread connecting me to another stranger. And when they share their life authentically and real and raw, it connects them to somebody else. And it reminds us that we're all united, we're all connected. And that's what I love about emotions is we might have 1,000 different things to separate us, but we all feel and we all have these wells inside of us that we can draw different things out of. And so for men, I would say, yes, I understand how important we feel it is to keep the armor up and don't let anyone see past it and never let a tear cross our cheek in front of somebody else. But I tell you, there's not a better gift that we can give each other than telling other people that we're not alone. And the way we can do that and to show that we understand what other people are going through is to share parts of ourselves that are vulnerable and emotional.
Yeah. Are there men's groups in Wyoming? Because I've interviewed a lot of men, and a lot of the men say, get to these men groups because there's lots online, and
Yeah.
maybe there are in Wyoming too. Just for the men listening, if they're recognizing, especially if they're from your state, to be vulnerable with other men in a group
Yeah.
like that. What do you think of that?
I don't know that there are a ton of like in person, at least I haven't been. And I'll give you an example. I was invited to speak at this men's conference last summer in which the state of Wyoming put it on. They spent a lot of money advertising and bringing in speakers, and it was a big deal. It was a 3-day conference. And one of the big nights was they were having me and a couple other people. It was called Men Speak, in which we would get up and share our lives and just share. I was going to share some poetry and just share just some vulnerability, just to show the power of vulnerability. And when we tell our story with other men, it might encourage them to have the courage to do it themselves. And it was a statewide advertising campaign, and there was like 10 people that came. And it was just one of those things that there are places for men to go, but at least in my area, people are so afraid of doing it because they do not want people to see them as something other than tough, immovable, constant, and those are important things to have to show that we're together. But it is that vulnerability, and when we share our story with one another, we're able to show people you're not alone in your struggles. And so there aren't a ton of opportunities. And so that's why I love talking about it. And that's why I constantly, and I don't know when I started writing poetry and putting all these things on Facebook, I think if I were to have a lie detector on me, I think that was the reason I started, was because I wanted other people to know that maybe I wasn't okay. And there were things that I was working through. But also at the same time, I wanted other people, at least one other person, to know that they're not alone. And I do get messages from men, not as many commenting online or in the comments section or upfront about it, but I do get quite a few messages from men saying, "Yeah, that's me too. I understand that. Thank you for writing that." And I think it's coming along for a lot of people and a lot of men. And I hope certainly in the next 5 to 10 years, I hope that's what I continue to do, is give other people permission to do what I'm doing and exploring my heart.
Yeah, very admirable. And thank you for that, John. Are there any other solutions with men like the men in Wyoming who are, as you said, a bit more maybe hard, a bit more stoic and unwilling to express themselves more than maybe some other states in America? What's the solution? How can we help them?
I think more leading by example, instead of me ever just saying, "Hey, here's here's the top 10 psychological benefits for having a little bit of vulnerability. Here's the importance of sharing your life with other and giving like an intellectual approach." For me, I look at it as like, how many more people can I invite around a virtual campfire that I try to create? And the more people we can get to sit around the campfire, and maybe I share my story for 5 or 10 minutes, or in a post on Facebook or wherever this make believe campfire is, I'm creating in my mind for people to join. That if and I'm a very flawed, broken person, if they see someone like me doing it, then they will be like, okay, I can do it too. And it's a chain reaction. I don't think there's anything I can do intellectually to convince someone who is afraid of sharing themselves or letting people see their hearts. There's no intellectual argument I can make. All I can do is show how it's changed my life. the ability, the luck, I guess, stumbling into finding that knot in my heart and finding that little end to start pulling on, how it has completely changed my life and given me purpose and connected me to this experience unlike anything else I've ever done before. That hopefully it's by leading through example doing that. And the more men that join me on that, people that join me on that, I think it gives people permission to do it themselves. It's probably just like a regular campfire. If we're all sitting around a campfire, someone tells a story, man, then the next person feels like, okay, I didn't have to go first. So good, I'll tell my story. And then the next person tells their story. And I think that's, what I'm trying to do without really trying to put a name to it.
Yeah, I love that. And I did say to John that, if he could please read any of his poetry on the show, and said he had a few bits that he could draw on at any time. Is there any particular one you'd like to read now?
There is, and let me just find it really, really, really quickly. It should be right here. It should be right here. There is a story. So I do these writing workshops and writing retreats, and they're not really about here's John telling people how to become a writer, because writing for me was something that just started emerging within the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. I've never studied poetry. I didn't really read it before. I didn't know anything about it until all of a sudden it just started coming out of me, emerging like a wildflower like out of a sidewalk or something. It's just started happening and emerging, and it was because I kept pushing it down, and it turned out I didn't think I had a story to tell. And there was a certain point in my life where I thought, I don't think I have anything to offer this world. And then it just started coming out without any intention. And so that's what this poem is about. It's about what it's like to feel caged inside and what happens when we're able to have that first moment of just sharing ourselves with the world in an authentic and real way. And that's what my writing retreats are about. It's not about here's how you get a best-selling book, here's how you get an agent, here's the 20 hot tips to make $1 million writing. No, it's about how important it is for us to share our stories with one another and for us to know our own story and have the courage for doing that. And so we just spend the weekends in these retreats just talking about what happens when we tell other people about our lives. And so here's a poem about that. Here's a story about you, my love, that I heard from a gossiping angel who was snacking on a strawberry in the tree in my backyard this past summer. The angel said that you used to soar above the world. They said you were once surrounded by so many miracles that nobody could tell whether wonder began and where you ended. You were a swirl of soaring grace. But then one day, a little while ago, a comet came roaring down and the sky came apart all around you. And after being so wounded by that, you became grounded to gravity and you found yourself wounded and walking in a foreign land. Eventually, you were captured by those who would tell you that flying for you would now be too dangerous. They said that you would enjoy the safety of confinement. So they put you in a cage and they clipped your wings for your own safety, they said. The angel went on to say that for years you stared through the iron bars and fantasized about taking flight once more, to feel the great wind in your face, to be untethered to earthly things, to be able to flirt with heaven again. I heard that you dreamed every night about being able to reclaim your freedom. But the freedom never really came, the angel told me, and over time you fell into an even deeper despair. I'll never leave this place, I heard that you repeated to yourself over and over. The angel said that in your most desperate hour, you prayed for God to let your heart stop beating so you could become a ghost in order to feel yourself become tangled up in the hot summer breeze again. even just for a second. I heard that you prayed to Spirit to allow your suffering to end, even if that meant you would be swept up into oblivion. And I began to weep when I heard your story because it sounded so familiar to mine. The angel reported somberly that your prayers were never really answered, and so you resigned yourself to being stuck into that cage forever. Then the angel told me that during one winter night, not too long ago, a moonbeam winked at you through the gaps in your cage bars, and how overtook you were by the soft glow, and how you sang a psalm about how lovely it all was. And the angel told me that the moon heard your song and it changed its hue from white to lavender. And then suddenly you remembered something you were told when you were first hatched. You were told that your voice will change the world and that there is no prison that can hold your song. The angel said that even though your wings were clipped and you were put into a cage, you let your voice grow feathers and it slips through the iron bars every night to explore the world. My love, I heard every time you open your mouth and sing, you escape the prison that you never thought you would leave. I heard that you learned that you don't need to have wings to get close to heaven anymore. You just need to find your voice. And as the angel hugged me goodbye, she told me that once you started singing, you've never stopped. And now you're surrounded by so many miracles that nobody can tell where the wonder begins and where you end. And that you are still such a swirl of soaring grace. Oh, my love, as the strawberry-scented angel rose up, I shouted how I couldn't wait to hear your song, because I know that once I do, it'll help me to find the courage to find my own song.
Beautiful. Thank you, John. Beautiful. I
Yeah.
love that. Yeah.
And that was a song that probably, I mean, a poem that I wrote a year ago, but it's definitely about my process of how I got from where I was as a young adult to where I am now 20 years later. It is this idea of like, maybe life didn't turn out the way I planned. Maybe, I had dreams of moving on and being in Saturday Night Live and doing other things in my life. And I found myself still in this small town, in this place that I was so desperate to leave and to explore the world and do things, but circumstance kept me here. And so, but I found there was a way to still explore the world and to still get out of the cage. And it was by sharing myself and singing my song. This poem, and I didn't know it when I was writing it at the time. When I write a poem, I write just purely from emotion. I don't know where it's going when I start. I just start writing for how I feel, and then once I'm done feeling how that is, I know I've reached the end of it. It's a interesting writing process, but this poem definitely talks about we might feel trapped in our lives, stuck in our lives, but the more we give, the more we share, the more we turn our heart into a lighthouse, the more it can bring wonderful. I mean, you and I have met this way because of the way I'm doing this. And it's just amazing how my life has changed. I'm still in Wyoming. I'm still not on Saturday Night Live. I'm still, despite my best desires, I don't look like John Hamm. I'm not a model. I'm not I'm not this grand thing that I might have thought of at 8 years old that I wanted to be, but I'm still exploring the world and I'm still experiencing grace because I've learned to share my story.
So powerful. And we'll get into maybe more about poetry later. But I want
Yeah.
to ask you now, your rock bottom moment as an adult, what was happening there?
That's a really, really interesting question. So again, when I said this is a slow boil for me, it really was. So when I was 20 years old, I started feeling the first pangs of deep unsettledness. And I knew something was wrong. I knew there was rot in the floorboards of my life, so to speak. I was in college and I was only going to college just to make my parents happy. I wasn't a great student by any measure, but I knew how to pass a class if I absolutely had to. And so I was in college. But my plan was, it was my junior year, I was going to drop out of college and move to Chicago and joined something called Second City, which was kind of a minor leagues for Saturday Night Live. You would go and train there, and you'd be a waiter. I'd be a waiter, and I would do comedy on the weekends, and that was my plan. I was going to drop out of college, and doing that and explaining that to my parents would be like explaining algebra to a newborn. I didn't know how I was going to tell I was going to leave academia behind, something they valued so much, so I could go do this pie in the sky thing. So I practiced my little speech, and I called my dad on the phone to tell him I was dropping out to go do this. And before I could even talk, he told me, he said, I'm going to need you to drop out this semester and come back and help take care of our family drugstore because I have lung cancer. And it was in that moment that, of course, I mean, what you're going to, I said, yes, of course. And I did. But it was this moment where I came back. I was in college far away from home, not that far away from home, but an hour away from home. It felt far. And I came back to help take care of my family, my dad, who was sick now, and he was fairly older, and my mom, who was fairly older, and then our old family drugstore that had been open since the 1800s. And all of a sudden, I was 20, 21, and kind of all this was put in front of me. And that's when that unsettled feeling really, like the moss under the floorboards, and it's really started growing quite a bit there. But I pushed it all away. I was like, this is my family responsibility. And at least it gave me some sort of purpose, because I didn't know what I wanted to do or anything. I knew I wanted to make people laugh and do that. I also recognized that was kind of a risky career choice. So this, for me, I felt like, well, at least I could have something to hang my hat on, and I'll be here for 2 or 3 years taking care of all this, and then I can go on and have my adventures. Well, those 2 or 3 years turned into 20 some, and then my dad died about 9 months later, and then I moved into the drugstore business full time, when I was helping manage a small business, which would have been a great reality television show, because I had no business doing business, but I was kind of thrust into that position. And my mom was older, so I was taking care of my mom at the same time, and I was grieving this life that I thought I was going to have. And my beautiful wife and I, we met when we were in middle school, and we started dating in high school. And so we had gotten married. We had gotten married while I had just come back to our town and taking care of my family. And we had our firstborn son right around the time after pretty soon after we were married. And my mom was still alive, but our firstborn son, and he was diagnosed with autism at 2. And so there was this other kind of moment where I felt unsettled and broken inside. And I was grieving this career I never had. I was grieving the fact that I was in Wyoming, where I wanted to be somewhere else, surfing in Hawaii or whatever was my imagination I wanted to do. And now our son, who I had this imaginary relationship, what father-son relationship was going to be like. And now it was going to be vastly different. And I found myself in my mid-20s grieving a career, grieving what fatherhood was supposed to look like. And that was my first really rock bottom moment. And then my mom passed away a few years after that, in which all of a sudden I didn't know what I was anymore. I wasn't our family store had closed. I wasn't taking care of my parents anymore. I wasn't taking care of our store anymore. So I hung everything on taking care of our stay-at-home dad for our autistic son. And my wife was amazing. She gave me the first lesson in improv I've ever learned. I remember coming home from the doctor's office when he was diagnosed at 2. I was already I was already still stuck in the doctor's office an hour earlier, where she was already saying yes to things. Yes, we're going to try this, and we're going to try this, and we're going to do this, we're going to jump into this. She was a culinarian at the time, a certified chef. She stopped doing all that and became she started studying autism. She now, 20 years later, she works with special needs people as a behavioral interventionalist. And she was the first example of what improv is like. Something comes, you just say yes to it, and you jump into it with your whole heart and soul. Well, I didn't right away. I was grieving all these things at once. And then my mom died, when my mom had died. And so I attached everything into being a dad for our stay-at-home dad for our son. And then all of a sudden, our autistic son, who the doctor said would never really have an independent life, he might not ever, he'll never have a first kiss, he'll never get married, he's not going to have all the things that we all take for granted. All of a sudden, he got into high school, and he blossomed. And the flower petals started coming out. And although, he was still had the diagnosis of autism, but he was able to, through a lot of hard work on his own and a lot of luck and probably a lot of hard work on his part, he has turned into this wonderful young man who didn't need me. And I think, so when you ask what was my rock bottom moment, it could have been when I was 20 and I wanted to move to Chicago, but I came back. No, that was just the beginning. It could have been a few years later when my dad and mom had died. No, it wasn't that. It could have been when my son was diagnosed with autism. No, it wasn't that either. It was years later when all of a sudden the store that I was kind of helping run was gone. My parents were gone. And now my son didn't need me in the way that I thought I needed to be needed. And all of a sudden, in that moment, I didn't know who I was anymore because I never really had a plan. I was just kind of going where I was needed. And now all of a sudden, I was 40 something years old and there was no identity. And I was completely lost and broken. And I was angry at God, and I was angry at myself, and I was angry at my 20-year-old self for saying yes, for coming back. And I was angry at so many things in my life. And that's what brought me to all of a sudden picking up a pen and starting writing about how it felt to feel so without a purpose in my life. And that was probably rock bottom. And it was a terrible place to be, but without it, I don't think it would have cracked me open in the way that it had.
Thank you for sharing that, John. I'd like to get into a bit, if I may, about you and your son, because I'd like to take this opportunity in case there's any men who are, in this position with, let's say, autistic children or, children with a medical condition. Like, I don't have a lot of experience in this. So, what would you say to those men to help them through with their fatherhood being, the best father they can be?
Yeah. And for me, I would love to say, like I kind of mentioned, that it was just like a light clicked on and I jumped right into it. No, for me, I know what it's like to feel that. I mean, we were in that doctor's office. I remember how the lights were flickering above. I can still smell the doctor's office. I can still remember everything about it when they gave us the news. And it was like getting a fatal diagnosis from a doctor, a physician saying, this is it. It's fatal. And I treated it as this is the it. This relationship I thought I was going to have with my son is now not going to be that at all. We're not going to have a typical father-son relationship. And it took me about 2 years to catch on to what my wife immediately jumped in and was just like, no matter what in the year 2002, where I'm in a kind of remote area, there wasn't a ton of resources for children with autism or families with a child living with autism. There wasn't a lot for that. We didn't have a doctor we could just run to and say, this is what we want. We kind of had to pick and choose our own adventure from there. And my wife was so brilliant about it because she just said, okay, we're going to try yes to music therapy. And I had never heard of music therapy back then. Oh yeah, we're going to try art therapy. That we have to do speech therapy. We're trying all these therapies. We're going to try this kind of diet for a while. We're going to try these supplements for a while. We're going to go hippotherapy, horseback riding, energy therapy, whatever it was. She was just saying yes to it. And here we go. And let's see what happens. So that's what I've learned is when something happens in the story, in the script that we think we have written for our lives, whether it's as a parent or as a boss or as someone we're in a relationship with a loved one, and we have the script where we think how it's just going to go linearly like this, beginning, middle, and end. But the great thing about stories, there's all these plot twists. And movies would be terrible that if in the middle of it, all of a sudden there was a plot twist and everyone just said, okay, I give up, and that's the end. Then that would be the worst movie ever. For me, I did for about 2 years. I just gave up. I was like, well, we're not going to have any kind of relationship. And then I saw the way my wife was just saying, yes, this, we're going to try this. We'll try this bridge. And then I jumped into the adventure of that. And once you get rid of that script that we as fathers have been given, this is what it's like to be a dad, and this is the relationship you need to have with your son. And if it doesn't work like that, then good luck. It's over. No, then you just throw out the script and you just pick up a pen and you just start writing it from scratch. And however, what I would say to any other father who's has a child with autism, just keep saying yes to that relationship every day. Don't don't put any judgment on it. Just show up every day. Be willing to let it break your heart every day. Be willing to let it surprise you every day. For me, that's one of my first improv lessons was our son being diagnosed with autism, because it shattered when I perform improv on stage, you have to take whatever the audience suggests to you and you just have to go with it, as if I'm going to be Margaret Thatcher milking a cow in space, I better be doing the best Margaret Thatcher zero gravity cow milking job anyone's ever done. You throw your whole being into that performance and you just go with it. And that's what I learned about parenthood, is it might not lead you exactly where you think you're going to go. You might have a different role than you thought you were going to have. Just say yes to what happens. You can't control. Well, what is that old adage? We can only control 90. Life is 99% what happens to us and 1% how we react to it. And really, the reaction is just saying yes. Okay, this has happened. This tragedy has happened. This plot twist has come in. So say yes to it. And don't worry. I bumped into a lot of family members or older family members, men who wanted to say, no, you don't talk about your child's diagnosis with other people. You just kind of put them away, so out of sight, out of mind, because it's kind of a shame on the family kind of business. And no, had I bought into that and just given up, then sure, I don't know where our son would have been. But it's the idea of finding your own way. Don't let other people give you the script for your family or your child, and build whatever relationship you need to in order to have something together. And don't be ashamed. Don't be like I was in the first moments after we got the diagnosis. Don't feel like, oh, this is some sort of curse, or what have I done? What have I done to offend God? Or you bring all this baggage into it like yourself, or what are other people going to think about our family, or any of that. No, it's fearlessness. It's loving recklessly. Love your child recklessly. And that requires, you might have to say goodbye to relationships. You might have to say goodbye to the script you were given. You might just have to start saying yes to things that sound crazy and out of the box. But I swear, the more you say yes to things and the more you explore and try to find these bridges between you and your child living with a special need, the more adventures you both will have together and the more chance you will have to connect.
Amazing, John.
I'm sorry. I do have a poem on autism, if this would be an opportune time
Perfect.
for that.
Yes.
Okay.
Please.
Yeah. This is one I wrote before I even knew I was writing poetry. I kind of wrote this for myself most of my writing I write in the moment, and then I share it with the world on Facebook immediately. This one I wrote and I kind of hid from myself for a while. I started writing this I wrote it in bits and pieces over about 5 years. And it was my experience of watching our son blossom through his autism. Autism doesn't mean broken. It means incandescent smile. It means courage beyond measure. It means watch this. It means don't you dare doubt me. It means this is a world of miracles. It means different is beautiful. It means unashamed. It means my story is still to be written. Autism doesn't mean broken. It means life is a flower bed of countless unique colors. It means burning heart. It means love don't stop. It means I have dignity. It means I am more than my diagnosis. It means angel of joy. It means the art of living in the present moment. It means raw honesty. Autism doesn't mean broken. It means obstacles don't scare me. It means let me teach you how to forgive. It means sunflower in the desert. It means a living example of wonderment. It means the mastery of gratitude. It means my goodness can't be obscured. It means whenever I face a wall, I build a door. It means my life is a song. Autism doesn't mean broken. It means I will not be judged. It means happiness is the journey, not the destination. It means please don't give up on me. It means my light is just as bright as yours. It means I can see souls. It means be patient with me. It means I fight every day. It means get out of my way. It means I'm worthy. Autism doesn't mean broken. It means created to be an instrument. It means listen to my eyes. It means a stretching ripple of grace. It means unafraid. It means deserving of love. It means the patron saint of the rising sun. It means don't leave me behind. It means I'm still in here. It means howling fearlessness. It means let me show you how a single smile can change the world. Autism, no, it doesn't mean broken. It means every breath is a gift. It means proof of the human spirit. It means open hands. It means vessel of strength. It means don't tell me what I can't do. It means adventure. It means a psalm of the furious rejoice. It means kissed by heaven. It means I will not be hidden. Autism doesn't mean broken. It means my veins run with gold and fire. It means I can't wait to prove them wrong. It means butterfly in the cocoon. It means dance with me. It means I will make my own path. It means I don't need your pity. It means a lighthouse on the shore of compassion. It means let me tell you about my dreams. It means I walk through the fire every damn day. It means fear is no match for willpower. Autism doesn't mean broken. It means I will be your living poem. It means just believe in me. It means I can do anything. It means, but don't be afraid. It means if you let me, I can teach you peace. It means I matter. It means I keep getting back on my feet. It means the sermon of silver linings. It means treasure hunter. And it means radiating zest. Autism means my heart isn't a broken puzzle piece. It's a mosaic of sacred stained glass painting the hardwood floors of this world in a divine light you can't possibly imagine. It means go ahead and sing. I'm going to play the holy hell out of these drums while you do. Autism means I will always find my way in the dark. And that's what autism means.
Beautiful. Love it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I really hope there's some parents of or grandparents of, autistic children watching. How old is your son now and how's he doing?
He's 22 now, and he is at the same university I was at, about an hour away. He is, I have never actually thought about this synchronicity until right now, since we've had this conversation. He is studying theater, of all things. He is he's going to be graduate next year. He's doing everything, and it's amazing because when he told me he was going to be a theater major, I conjured up my parents, and my initial worry was theater. What? What are you going to do with theater? And of course, the hypocrisy, there's complete circleness of the story that I'm in. Yes, I had the same worries that my parents had. He loves creating stage work. He likes doing lights. He likes doing stuff behind the scenes. He finds he finds sharing art that way is just as impactful as being on stage, reciting a monologue. He loves expressing himself through that and supporting actors. And I couldn't be more proud. And it's, he's living with people in a townhouse. He's very quirky. He can be shy, but he's never met anyone he doesn't love. He's been my best teacher I've ever had in my life, by far. And probably the reason that I was able to, once I saw him work through the knots in his own life, it probably gave me the courage to do my own knots and my own work. And so that's the kind of what I want to pass on to other people.
Yeah. Do you think children come in choosing their parents?
I don't like to think so. And I tell them I have two other boys. So we have all boys here. It's like a feral wolf pack, and ranging between 22 and 16. And I constantly tell them this is not my fault when they get kind of annoyed at me. I say you chose me. I don't, and I think it's like that with people we meet too. Not only our family that we connect with and we love so dearly, we feel this like clicking of Legos, like this was always meant to be. But there's also the people that we meet in our life. Where I was in a van ride with two young women after a riding retreat in South North Carolina. We were just strangers in a van ride, and all of a sudden we just started talking to each other. And 2 hours later, we're crying and hugging each other, and we became these great friends. Like one lives in New York, one lives in California, and I live in the middle of nowhere in Wyoming. And we've created this bond of friendship, and it felt like we knew each other for years. And so I really feel like there's these threads and these soul connections that we had before we ever got into this rock and roll adventure we're all on, that I think had to have existed because of moments like that, where we connect with someone so perfectly that we already know them.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's really important to take this opportunity to mention that the doctor's diagnosis is not always set in stone. And your son is living proof of that. So, I mean, I'm not very fond of doctor's diagnosis. I think you can always override them. So I love this story of exactly how he did that. Have you got anything
It's
more to
just
add?
yeah, it's just not letting someone else write your own story.
Yes.
And write your own story. And if I get a terrible diagnosis tomorrow, that will not be my story. I will find a way of telling my story despite that. If whatever the bad things that happen to us that are outside of our control, that can't be our story. It's how we respond to it and how we keep singing through the cage bars. That should be our story. And so, yes, diagnosis is a bank account number, how little or much we have in our bank accounts. I would speak because I wasn't very good at school. Our grades, all these things don't tell our story. We tell our story.
Love that so much. John, we've got about half an hour left. What from
Mhm.
your experience needs to be brought into this conversation around men, masculinity, society, healing, boys? You've got a family of boys. What are we going to talk about that other men might enjoy hearing?
That's a great question. I think we talked about the power of vulnerability and sharing, and how it's important for other people, for us to share our lives. For me, for example, when I kept it all hidden inside and buried inside, it was like a poison. And it felt like I was not breathing. I wasn't breathing out. And now that I've started sharing my life with other people in a radical and different way, it has made me more empathetic. And I think for men, I think for people in general, for sure, men specifically, empathy sometimes is forgotten. It's a forgotten tool that we have in our toolbox. We immediately, when confronted with someone we disagree with, we find out reasons why they're a villain, and we turn them into characters and villains, and we don't listen to other people. As a man, I will say, and I don't know if this is typical, I'd hate to speak for men in general, sometimes listening was not my greatest skill. Sometimes I get stuck in my own head and my own thoughts, and I want to be right all the time, and I want to win, and I want to knock out someone who's feeling like a threat to me. And really, so one quick story. I worked as a community reporter in this small town that I live in. And I only started doing that. It was right before COVID. I only started doing it really just to pay bills. I had no experience being a journalist before doing anything like that, but some people had saw that I could put sentences together and asked if I wouldn't mind covering certain, civic things going around our town, like city council or things like that. And I went into it very naive. I didn't know, I wasn't a journalist. I just went into it as a person, like I just wanted to, write down what happened, what people said, and then move on with, whatever. And then that a little thing called COVID came along, and people already didn't like people in the news. Already going into that, people really didn't like people in the news after that, and for good reasons and bad reasons. Like I was a small community reporter. I didn't have any kind of globalist agenda for COVID. I was just merely going to meetings, writing down what people said, and then putting it into stories so people could read. I wasn't a decision maker. I was a messenger. And so it made a lot of people, and which is what I was doing. A lot of people were not happy with what people in government were saying, or doctors were saying, or health departments were saying. And so a lot of that anger was usually directed towards me. And so I would cover things, and I am not a confrontational person. I've never, I'm shaped like a penguin. I don't get in many bar fights. So I wasn't really used to, having people be so angry at me all the time. I would receive dozens of messages a week, angry, threatening messages, things like that, tires slip and cars, just crazy experiences. And so I knew there was this group of people that just didn't like me just because of my vocation. And I understood where the distrust came from, but I was literally just the messenger. But so I was angry at them for this 2-year period. I was a reporter during COVID. I didn't like any of them. They didn't like me at all. And then I got the opportunity my work and my poetry was able to support itself. So I was able to not have to do that anymore. And so I had stopped being this community reporter. And I bumped into one of the gentlemen who was kind of the spokesperson for this group of malcontents who did not like me. And I didn't like them, and they didn't like me. And then I was talking to him about a month or two after I had stopped working, and he said, we really didn't like you. And I said, well, I really didn't like you either. And he's like, but part of the reason why we were so angry towards you, one person in particular, is because his wife had died. And she had passed away during COVID, and then his sister had died too. He had lost like 2 or 3 people in the course of 6 or 7 months. And during COVID, there were no funerals. You weren't able to get in public gatherings. And so that exacerbated how angry he was about everything. And I sat there and I listened to this really heartbreaking story. The person, his wife had died. He had met her when they were in junior high and high school. Very similar to my experience. Vastly different ways we view the world and, how we might treat other people. But I listened to the story of this gentleman who had his heart broken repeatedly. And then I remembered, I know what it's like to grieve. I know how hard it is. And immediately I softened my approach towards this person that I just didn't like, who used to send me the worst messages, who used to send me the most hateful things, angry things. But I listened to part of his story, and that anger made sense. And that was just the only way he felt like he could share his anger and his feelings that he was hiding inside. He was never talking about his grief, his friend told me, but you could feel the grief coming off of him. It was coming out in other ways. It was coming out in these letters he was writing me. And so I heard this story about this gentleman, and I forgave him. And I wrote him a letter, back, and we kind of exchanged a couple things back and forth. And I said, I heard what was going on in between my relationship as a community reporter and your role as a very angry, concerned citizen. And we're two humans, and we both know what it's like to lose somebody. We both know what it's like to have an empty seat at the table. And I was so sorry to hear what you were going through. And that way of approaching it as a human, as a person, not as someone trying to win or to score on somebody or win a Twitter battle or any of that. That's part of the feral circus house I live in.
It's all right.
We weren't trying to.
Unusual. Mine's been quiet today, but
oh, good. No, good. Now
right.
I was probably inspired. I'm surprised they were this quiet this long. I should hand out NyQuil. Anyway, so it was this idea of just listening to someone else who I considered an adversary, and then he listened to me, and we connected as two men, not as two people who had political differences or things like that. And for me, when I think about my own kids growing up, I haven't taught them very much of anything. I can't build anything. I can't grow anything. I'm not really good at math. I can't explain the world very well. But the only lesson I keep teaching them is, above all, kindness. And the way we can, and I'm so worried about what the world looks like in 20 or 30 years. And I tell them the only way we're going to be around in 20 or 30, 40 years in a functioning society with community is we have to start learning to be kind to one another again. And We have to learn to listen to one another, because once we do, empathy follows. And empathy is the only thing that is going to get us to survive this next 20 or 30 years of everyone being so angry and offended and outraged at each other, and sides, and whose side are you on? Sides, we can't we won't stick together as a society that long if we keep doing that. And the only way we can get back to community mindedness and to connectedness is to listen to one another, and to drop down these barbed wire fences, a Wyoming male cowboy term, these fences and things we put in between each other. If we cut down those fences and we just sit down and we share a beer or a cup of coffee with each other, then we're going to learn about each other. And we might disagree, but we're going to disagree as humans who have dignity and not characters that we built of each other in our minds.
So powerful. Mine was barking.
Oh, good. It was a call and response.
Probably heard yours. This is great. So, yeah, can we bring into the conversation about your sons? Because how many sons have you got all up?
Three.
Three, right. So, young men, I mean, we spoke about your now healed, I don't even like to call him, I don't know, he's not autistic anymore, is he? The son we spoke about before, your angel. Or young men as a whole, what are they going through during this tough period of world reshaping?
Anger. I mean, I feel a lot of anger. I can just feel it radiating as if you were walking past a heater. I can feel this anger. But here's the thing. Anger is not always bad. When we repress it, when we hide it, when we bury it, when we don't do anything with it and we just ingest it, that's where it becomes evil. And it's this anger that no one knows what to do with. And so what I tried to do is tell people, and young people, I was doing a poetry thing with some young people, and we talked about this. Is like, it's okay if you're writing a poem that's angry, because someone young man was like, all my stuff is really kind of obscene and angry. It's like, that's great. You're getting it out. You're giving it life. You're letting its voice be heard, because these emotions we feel, they're like little birds singing that have a song, and we got to let it out and let it learn from it. And if you don't let it out, it's going to manifest and turn into poison inside of us. And so even anger, and I think it's a period of anger right now, and it's okay to let it out, to do something with it, to serve this world maybe with angry hands, but you're out there serving, helping people, and maybe you wish you were doing something else and you're serving, but it's driving you to be a force of change in the world. Not anger is like, well, I'm going to light things on fire, but no, I'm going to light people on fire. I'm going to help people. And whatever that emotion that's pushing you to do it, don't hide from it. Don't bury it like you're ashamed of it. Let it out in a healthy way. And that's why I teach writing in that way, because I find it to be a very healthy way of letting the steam out. With young men specifically, I feel this. I mean, I was just talking about it with my children, all the things they've experienced over the last 10 years alone, just with crazy stories and, institutions that we all used to think were shakable, church, government, whatever, education, they've all been rattled. I mean, there is some uncertainty, and every year there's a crazier story than the next of something new that's coming along that we, once every 50 years is happening every 3 months around here, it seems. And, starting in America, you can't go a day or two without the headline news breaking into some sort of new crisis or never seen before moment in the history of mankind. And my children feel uncertain. And words like, what is the point of doing anything if in 20 years, we're just heading for this collapse? And I say it's kind of what happened with me. It's the plot twist that's coming. We're in the middle of a plot twist, of a resetting of priorities, of a way we look at treating one another. And maybe in my own life, I had to reach that rock bottom moment where the acorn felt like it was going to get crushed under the weight of the earth. But no, it was just that moment right before we break into something new and beautiful, and to not give up despite how dark it is. And it's okay to be angry if you're angry. It's okay to be afraid. Boys don't like being afraid. They don't like showing that they're nervous, scared, or afraid. And again, that's one of those feelings. It's fear is a wonderful thing. Fear, it helps us stay alive. Fear is an important song that we should listen to in our hearts from time to time. But when we hide from that fear, when we bury it, it turns into something down the line that we can't control. I deal with panic attacks that come from time to time, and it's probably because of my relationship with fear for the first half of my life. I hid from it. Whenever I felt afraid, I just stopped. I just denied it, and I wouldn't deal with the problem that my fear was trying to tell me to deal with. And a bill comes due for all that. Just like with anger, a bill will come due for that if you don't deal with your anger. Fear is one of those tricky ones too. Grief is a tricky emotion. If you don't deal with it and build a relationship with that grief, it's going to bury you alive. And I saw that with my own mom. Grief buried her because she just compartmentalized it and made it its own little bunker that she never interacted with. And so for my children, I tell them anything you're feeling, fear, anger, it doesn't always have to be, you don't always have to show us that you're happy. You don't always have to show these things. There's no script. I'm not judging you for not being smiling all the time or riding in on a unicorn like everything's great. I want to know the heartache as much as I want to know the successes. And so that's what I think I'm trying to do is like, don't try to compete with each other. Don't try to be perfect in this Instagram filter world of everything's got to look perfect and our hair has to be just right. And I have to have my phone so it doesn't show my little rolls here. I just have to have everything right and perfect because that's what we're showing to each other online 24/7. And it's like, no, the real magic is in these fallible parts of ourselves. And so it's tough with boys, though. I mean, I've never, Roedel girl has not been born in my family since the 30s. So I don't know how I would deal with a girl. I would probably have, it would probably be a completely different situation. But with boys, it's just the invitation. And that's what I'm trying to do with my own work and my own life. It's just give that example of what happens when you're able to be a little bit more vulnerable than you think you should be.
Interesting for that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, the younger generation are definitely seeing it tough. And I imagine, their
Yeah.
outlook is like, so we spoke about America. So let's talk about what has to happen in America with American men. What do you see the solution as being?
I don't know. My dog has some thoughts. I don't know what a solution is other than kind of what we talked about, being able to listen to one another politically, religiously. We have so many places where we go. It's like, okay, what team are you on? You're in this team. What religion? Okay, you're in this religion. And we identify ourselves by these boxes that we check on these forms. And that's who we are. And that's who our tribe is. And this is our community. And if you concede anything to the other side, then you're not a real one. And there's this litmus test of all these groups that we have to be in. And it has broken us as community. My dad used to be, and one of the things I learned from my dad, he was very quiet. He was a very funny guy. He wasn't one of the kind of dads who sit down and you'd sit on his lap and he'd smoke a pipe and give you some parental advice. He was very quiet when it came to that. But one of the things he went to is this group of men, and they all would dress up once a month, like very fancy, as like black tie affair. And he was not a tie wearing kind of guy, but once a month they would get dressed up and they would all meet. It was called the Young Men's Literary Club, in which there would be there's like 100 men in this group from all the ages from 18 to 100. And they would just get together and they would read things that they wrote during the week, or like you would get 1 or 2 times a year where you could go into this meeting and read. And they would sometimes they would do something historical, sometimes they would do something that was a memoir or self-reflective, sometimes they would write just whatever it was that was on their mind. They'd have to present like a 5-page paper. And my dad said that's what kept him young at heart, is when he heard young people heard their perspective, and the older generation sat down and listened to them. And the young people in the group would sit and listen to the older people and their things. And then immediately, and there were people from all walks of life in there. There were people who didn't have a dollar to their name, and there were people there who were mayors. There were lawyers in there, and there were teachers in there, and there was just this casserole of humanity, all these men together, and they weren't unified by their political party or anything like that. They were unified by just being men in a group together, sharing parts of their life. And it's that little seed of, the more we listen, the more I try to listen to my children and try to encourage them, that and know that I don't have all the answers. I don't have all the answers. And I think that's one of the scripts we're given as men is, okay, once you have the answers and you're certain of everything in life, hold true to that and die on that hill no matter what. I have surrendered a lot of the things that I thought I once knew over the last 5 years, whether it be about religion or whether it be the way my worldview or things like that, things that I would have gotten to arguments over a glass of beer with friends a year or two, 5 or 6 years ago, wanting to be right and to win that argument. It doesn't matter to me anymore. It's because it's not about, we're not here to be right. We're not here to win arguments. We're not here to be on the winning team. We're here to learn from one another and to be connected to one another. And if we're going to only learn from 12 people at a time or 100 people at a time, we're missing out on so many amazing people out there just because they're not checking the right box. And so if we could have, what's a practical piece of advice? If we could have more things like that young men's literary club, like my dad used to go to in the 60s, where you would just show up and you would just share part of your life with other men without any judgment, without worrying about being right or wrong. And people sat and listened to you and learned from your perspective and just added one more mosaic tile to this experience. Because the more men we listen to other men, and we listen to women, and women listen to us, and we all listen to one another, we're just adding another mosaic tile to this masterpiece. But if we don't do that, we're only going to stare at the same 4 tiles, and how boring is that? And I can't believe that's why we came here. I can't believe that's why we're here, to win arguments or to be the right one or any of that. We're all in this mystery together. It's an unsolvable, wonderful riddle we're all part of. And isn't that fun? And shouldn't we working together to solve that riddle and that mystery, instead of saying, I already know everything and I'm never going to learn anything new?
Yes, so good, John. Awesome. Where does the heart come into all of this?
It's a central part for me, because it was a part of so there were, the head and the heart. Me and my head have more of a relationship where it tells me what to be afraid of in the future. And my heart is a wonderful guide, but it's usually sometimes a little emo, or maybe it drinks too much wine, and it tells me of all the things I should be upset about that I did yesterday. And so I get trapped between my head and my heart, and I never had a really good relationship with either of them until I learned to have a relationship with my lungs and be in the present moment. And the more I learned to focus on my breathing, then all of a sudden, once I was able to love the present moment, me and my heart got along perfectly. As soon as I was to quit worrying about, and even though I have not been a very ambitious person my whole life, I've never really had a plan of what I wanted to be or do when I wanted to grow up. I would only think short term in the future. I would still worry about what would happen tomorrow, and I would have fake arguments in my head with someone I might bump into in the next day, and it'd have all these future worries. And the more I gave up on the future and remembered just to live in this present moment, in this breath, my lungs moved me over into my heart, and it reintroduced me to my heart again. And in there, in the heart, there's these terrifying places of trauma and guilt and shame that sometimes get stored in there that we visit all the time. But just past that, there's this wonderful neverland of imagination and mystery and spirituality and wonder and miracle that exists in the heart. And I'm a prime example, a person who didn't know anything about poetry or writing about it or studying. Any English teacher I would have ever had would have said, no, he cannot even complete a full sentence. He can't even fill out a check, let alone write a poem. The fact that this has emerged from me only because I've started excavating and digging around in my heart. I got past the guilt and the shame and those parts in our heart that's some in the trauma, things are there that we have to sometimes talk to and explore and don't hide from it. But you don't have to stay there in those caves. You can go out of the caves, and then there's a sunflower field of stretching heartwork that exists in front of you, where you can go to each flower and each memory, and it's beautiful. And it's, yeah, my writing is from the heart. It's not from the head. I'm still trying to. So we've bridged my heart and my lungs, bridged my relationship with my soul and my heart. We're still working on my head, and that will be maybe the next phase of the Saul of that. But I definitely write everything from the heart, from emotion. I don't write unless I'm feeling something. I have to drop everything I'm feeling and I jump into something that I'm writing. Because I don't want it to be an autopsy later where I'm talking about something I felt 2 or 3 days ago. I want to write about how I'm feeling it right then and there. It's like there's dream journals. We're supposed to write when we wake up, write your dream journal when it's fresh, so you can remember the purple cloud and whatever the talking moose or whatever you bump into in our dreams. You want to have the vivid memory of it. And so that's what I do when I feel something. When I feel it, I write about it in that when it's fresh and it's raw. I don't stop. I don't edit it. I just get it out as quickly and as real as I can, because it helps me be fearless. The more I stop and think about it, the more I might go back and edit it and change it and try to impress somebody. And that's why I use Facebook. I write about it in real time. And then before I can do anything, I give it to the world before I go back and even edit it or look at it a second time, because then it's part of the world and I can't really go back. And I could delete it, I guess, but then I might have people asking me about it. It feels like I'm accountable to other people when I do it that way. And I just put it out there in the world and there's no takebacks. And that's still the writing process I do today to do that. It's this heart work. It's this writing from the heart. And that's why, I'm so glad I was able to get into this part of my heart. And I can't wait to keep exploring. I think I'm only 1% of the way through.
So good. John, what do you say to men who are like, oh, well, I'd like to explore poetry, but, they're in this place of, everything has to come out perfectly, or, I mean, not all. You can write poetry and publish it on Facebook, it's a choice. So what do you say to men who come to you and were interested in poetry, but not quite sure where to start?
Well, I would tell them that listen to whatever's tugging there. For me, it was for years. I knew I had something inside of me that was just tickling at the topsoil. Something wanted to burst out. And I didn't know it was poetry. Had I gone into it thinking, oh, I need to write poetry, I probably wouldn't have written anything. When men talk to me specifically about, what should I do? I have these feelings I don't know what to do with. It's like, should I write poetry? And my response is, whatever it is, however it comes, whether it's poetry, whether it's music, whether it's painting, whether it's horseback riding, whatever it is, you need to express and get these feelings out of you and be able to make them real. And that's why art is always an easy way of doing that. When I write something how I feel, my feelings become a piece of physical property. I can write a poem on a piece of paper and my feelings suddenly are real, and there it is right there. It's my feelings obituary, how I felt 20 minutes ago, and here's how I felt 20 minutes ago. I don't feel that way now, but I felt this way while I wrote it, and it's real. See, painting does the same thing. Writing a song does the same thing. But it's whatever you can do to make these feelings come to life and be real for you so you can look at them and see them. And, so what I tell people is like, don't feel like you have to write a poem. Just write something. Maybe you're writing your name over and over and over, but every time your pen drives across and spelling your name out, just writing our own name, there's emotion in it. When we just do it once, but imagine writing your name 500 times. And by the time you get to the 300th time writing your name, you're thinking about your childhood. You're thinking about why your parents named you that way. And you're thinking about all the memories of your life by just writing your name. And then later on, you might be writing, like, what are people going to think about me in 100 years? Or my family, what will my name mean in 100 years? And then by the time you get to the 500th time you've written it, it's like, maybe my name doesn't matter. And whatever name I was given was just given to me by somebody else. Maybe I have my own name. Maybe we are all nameless. Maybe we're all named the same thing. Regardless of what it is, that's how I write. And that's how I express it. Maybe it's poetry, and maybe you're writing an essay, or maybe you're writing just, I went to the store today and blah, whatever it is, put something down, make it real, how you feel, make it real. And maybe that's painting, but it's got to be something physical. Maybe you build something with your hands, pottery, but make something, turn your emotion into a physical thing that you can look at and hold or read again. And then all of a sudden, you're introduced to part of yourself you didn't know existed. I didn't know these words existed in me until I started writing them. There's this wonderful painter on Instagram I just started following. She didn't know she sells art all around the world. She didn't know she was a painter until one day she just was so built up and anxious and angry that she just started just painting on canvas, and it turned into this wonderful artwork that people love. And it's only because she was putting a physical representation to how she felt. And when we do that, we introduce ourselves to our feelings that we've been hiding from and trying to change our postal address so they can't find us. And when we make them real, we can have a relationship. I have a relationship with my grief. I have a relationship with my joy. Whatever it is, you build a relationship with it when you write it as a poem, as a song, as a piece of pottery. Maybe you build a statue, whatever it is, just do something.
So good. Awesome. Well, we'll start to wrap up now, John. So first of all, where can people find you, please? And I'll drop all your links below.
Cool. That's really nice. So I have a really creative website URL called johnroedel.com. That's where you can, I have a newsletter there so people can stay caught up on things. I have some writing events that I have coming up. I'm trying to stretch my wings and go more international. That's the hope of the next year. But right now, I'm just some U.S. writing events. But this is all kind of new for me. So the butterfly is still coming out to stretch up her wings. I am also on Facebook quite a bit. I write daily on Facebook. I usually try to write 4 or 5 things a week, or share something that I wrote a year earlier or something like that. That kind of feels meaningful now. So those are the big places. I have books on Amazon, but who doesn't?
So good. Okay, so 2 more things. First, please, a final message to men, and then would you please do us the honor of reading one last poem?
Oh, I would love to. And this will be, I'll cut 2 pieces of cake in one chop here. My advice to men is there is courage in being vulnerable. Yes, we've been taught to, when we get wounded, when we have an open wound, to bite our lip and to just grit our teeth and don't flinch. And there are maybe times in our life where that's important to do, where you don't want to scare other people. But those, for example, when our children never see us cry, they will never learn to cry in front of other people. And I'm not saying they need to cry during a Hallmark commercial on TV or cry at the drop of a hat. But there are times in our life where a single tear coming down an adult's face can change a child's life and give them permission to share their own feelings and to cry themselves. I know we're taught that hiding those things is what being tough and what being courageous is about. But take it from a 5'3" man who knows nothing about physical courage. But I know it takes, I know it takes just as much courage to show our true emotions as it does to fight a fire. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to show your kids. Don't be afraid to show your friends in your life emotions, because it's not only a cry for help sometimes for you, but it's also a lighthouse for other men to say, you know what? He did it. He's living like this. I can do it too. It's that idea of being around the campfire together. Be the first person to share the story so it breaks the ice, so other people feel the courage to share their story. And the last piece of advice will go into the poem. And it's an encouragement to stay present in the moment, to not be seduced by the past or the future, and to stay connected to who you are right now without anxiety about 24 hours from now or shame about something that might have happened 24 hours ago. And this is a poem that I wrote in the middle of a panic attack in 30 minutes. And it gave voice to exactly how I felt and where I wanted this relationship and how my relationship with the different parts of my body are going to be for the rest of my life. My brain and heart divorced a decade ago over who was to blame about how big of a mess I've become. Eventually, they couldn't be in the same room with each other, and now my head and heart share custody of me. I stay with my brain during the week, and my heart gets me on weekends, but they never speak to each other. Instead, they just give me the same note to pass between them each week. And the notes they have me pass between them, they always say the same thing. They say, "This is all your fault." On Sundays, my heart complains about all the ways my head has let me down in the past. And on Wednesdays, my head lists all the times my heart has screwed things up for me in the future. They blame each other for the state of my life. And well, there's been a lot of yelling and crying. So lately, I've been spending a lot more time with my gut, who kind of serves as my unofficial therapist. Most nights I sneak out of the window in my rib cage, slide down my spine, and I plop myself down on my gut's plush leather couch that's always open for me. And I just sit until the sun comes up. But last evening, my gut asked me if I was having a hard time being caught between my heart and my head. I nodded. I said, I just didn't think I could live with either of them anymore. I said, my heart is always sad about something that happened yesterday, while my head is always worried about something that might happen tomorrow. I lamented. My gut just squeezed my hand, but I continued. I said, I just can't live with my mistakes of the past or my anxieties of the future. Well, my gut smiled at me and said, in that case, I think you should go stay with your lungs for a while. I was confused. The look on my face gave it away. So my gut said, if you're exhausted about your heart's obsession with your fixed past and your mind's focus on an uncertain future, your lungs are the perfect place for you. There's no yesterday in your lungs. There's no tomorrow there either. There's only now. There's only inhale. There's only exhale. There's only this moment. There is only breath. And in that breath, you can rest for a little bit while your head and your heart work out their relationship. So this morning, while my brain was busy reading tea leaves and while my heart was staring at old photographs, I packed up a little bag and I snuck down to my lungs. And before I could even knock on the door, she opened it. And with a gust of wind and a smile, she embraced me. And she said, darling, what took you so long? And that's it. Don't be afraid to rest in your lungs for a while. When the plot twist comes, when you're on the phone and your life changes in a phone call or in a doctor's office, or things like that happen, where these plot twists come and we worry about everything that happened in the past and what did we do to cause this, or we worry about, oh, what does this mean for 10 years from now? We can't control any of that. We can control how we react in that moment. And when we're vulnerable to share our lives with other people, the first person we have to be vulnerable with is ourselves, and to listen to ourselves. And what it's usually crying out for is to rest and to breathe and to be in the moment and to not worry about yesterday or tomorrow or all the things we can't control. And men, we love to control things. But don't worry about that. Worry about your breath. Worry about this moment. Worry about being your true, authentic self and breathe. And then we put on the air masks for other people in the plane with us. breathe for yourself, and then help other people. And for me, the way of helping other people is by sharing my emotions and the power that comes from that and how it can change your life.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, John. I
Oh,
really enjoyed this interview. You are full of wisdom and just great, words and imagery, and that ball of string unraveling, just how you explain everything and express everything. Definitely a poet at heart. Thank you so
well, thank
much.
you. I told you this before we started. I had been secretly crossing my fingers that you would ask me on, and then you did, and so I've been like this the whole time under the table. I was like, so I am really, really honored to have been here. I love your voice. I love your heart, and so I'm really, really grateful.
Thank you, John. Everyone, thanks for watching. If you could like, share, subscribe, and I will be back in a couple of days with next, I think I'm on with Man Speak. So I'll see you then. Thank you, John. If you could just stay on and I'll get a title show from you.
You got it.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.